Rising like old corpses. Stephen King and the horrors of time past. In the fiction of Stephen King, behind the snarling werewolves, lurching zombies, and ghosts holding perpetual parties, stands the less dramatic but more relentless horror of the past. Throughout the novels and short stories, past time escapes and intrudes into the present, corrupting the current moment with old values, outgrown beliefs, and long suppressed fears. The past must be permanently escaped. Even the past self must be escaped. If the future is to achieve realization, and the individual is to create, through experience, a new self. King's horror of the past parallels in many ways the more metaphysical view of Samuel Beckett, who, discussing Marcel Proust, argues that the past cannot be escaped. Yesterday has deformed us, or been deformed by us. Deformation has taken place. Often in King's fiction, this past deformation has occurred to children, like the 4 boys of the body, different seasons, all of whom have been damaged, physically or psychologically, by their upbringing, from Teddy's seared ears and Chris's bruises to Gordon's rejection by his parents. Gordon, the adult narrator, tries to find his lost boyhood in the time span of the dead Ray Brower, to understand, in Brower's absence, the loss of self and the inability to reclaim that self. As he tries to comprehend the dead boy's isolation from human tenderness, as well as the environment's indifference, something could eat on him. He is searching for an explanation of his parents' long-ago rejection of him. Beckett quotes Proust's belief that men occupy a greater area in time than in space because they touch at once those periods of their lives so far apart in time. Thus Gordon fantasizes that he might find the dead boy's blueberry pail and stare into it, feeling it, trying to understand, hoping to discover who he was at that time and the various people he has become since then. By returning to that time and place and reviewing his life's journey from then to the present, Gordon hopes to understand what he has become. Yet both Beckett and King imply that the person of that earlier time is so far removed from the one of the present that understanding is impossible. According to Beckett, the individual who confronts this resurrection of his former life is not the one who lived it, for the intervening time has caused an unceasing modification of his personality, whose permanent reality, if any, can only be apprehended as a retroactive hypothesis. Throughout the individual's life, the hypothesis is constantly being reasserted. The concluding word of Lucky's speech in Waiting for Godot affirms that a living person is always unfinished. King sees the past as a look back into insanity. We think we remember what happened to us when we were kids, but we don't. The reason is simple. We were crazy then. Looking back into this well of insanity as adults, we attempt to make sense of things that make no sense, and remember motivations which simply don't exist. King's statement, we fall from womb to womb, from one blackness to another, remembering little of one and knowing nothing of the other, Danse Macabre, strongly parallels the limitations of existence described in Waiting for Godot. The stride of a grave and a difficult birth. Down in the hole, lingeringly, the gravedigger puts on the forceps. We have time to grow old. Any escape from the past in King's fiction provides only a temporary respite. Events, experiences, and guilts reappear. The associations the memories bring to the surface are as unpleasant as weak old river corpses brought to the surface by cannon fire, the body. With these memories, old habits often return together with past events which want to repeat themselves. Individuals are menaced as much by their previous selves and actions as they are by external evils. In the simplest form, an event or person from the past upsets the calm of a character's present existence. In I Am the Doorway from Night Shift, an astronaut realizes, 5 years after his spaceflight, that he is host to an alien organism. He destroys his hands, where the host is located. But 7 years after that, new spots appear on his chest. His self-mutilation has not removed the threat from the past. Deliberate parallels between past and present actions are made in the story appropriately called Sometimes They Come Back. Jim Norman finds that after 16 years he is caught up in a pattern from his past. 3 hoodlums who killed his brother and were themselves killed in an auto accident have returned from the grave to terrorize him. They systematically kill the better students in his class and then his wife. When he agrees to meet them to complete what they see as the unfinished business of his death, he sets the scene as closely as possible to what it was in the earlier time. The sound of a train, coins with the right dates, even the same dialogue. But to replace his brother Wayne, killed in the original encounter, Jim summons a demon that destroys the ghosts when the repeating pattern forces them to stab it as they had stabbed Wayne. But the demon's final line, "I'll come back," implies that Jim may be caught up in future cycles of horror as the title of the story takes on a new meaning. A similar congruence between past and present appears in the later story, The Monkey, which also illustrates one of King's favorite time parallels, the span between generations. The sudden appearance of the toy monkey in the mouldering Ralston Purina box brings Hal Shelburne's childhood back so strongly that in his next speech after seeing the monkey, he quotes his Uncle Will, who had been dead for years, and he thinks, "This place was so much like the back closet of the house in Hartford that they might all have been transported 30 years back in time. I won't think about that." Yet he cannot avoid the thought, for, as Beckett points out, yesterday is irremediably part of us, within us, heavy and dangerous. As the memory floods back, Hal tries to cope, tries to get through it so it would be gone again. For the monkey had haunted his childhood and had returned each time he disposed of it. In the time span of the story, he does sink the monkey into a deep lake, although he imagines someone hooking it with a fishing line and pulling it back out. This ability of characters to anticipate the future in Sometimes They Come Back and The Monkey occurs in a number of King's stories and novels. He seems deliberately ambiguous in showing whether such glimpses are the character's overactive imagination. Hal Shelburne thinks those were only things that might be, or precognition, but the weight of evidence favors the latter. In Cujo, Tad sees in his bedroom closet a vision of the mad dog that will cause his death, even before the St. Bernard is bitten by a rabid bat. Jake, the boy in the Dark Tower, the gunslinger, remembers the death that brought him to the gunslinger's world, and anticipates his death in that world. "You're going to kill me. He killed me the first time, and you are going to kill me now." An accusation which the gunslinger denies, although he sees a vision of the boy with a spike in his forehead, and later does let him fall to his doom. In Pet Sematary, Louis Creed, the father, has the first hint of the power of the Wendigo and the death of his son when he carries Gage to bed and encounters on the stairs a sudden feeling of horror. The most curious example of such precognition occurs in It. Young Georgie Dembra fumbles across a can of turtle wax and examines the picture of a turtle on the lid with a kind of hypnotic wonder. Later he asks himself, "Where did I see a turtle like that before?" But he receives no answer. The turtle that fascinates him is the image of the great turtle that his brother Bill encounters in the fight with It at the edge of the universe. But those two encounters are 8 months and 28 years in the future, and Georgie will die of shock and blood loss within an hour of his seeing the turtle box when his arm is ripped off by It. In a similar fashion, Patty Uris thinks, as she tries to break into the bathroom where Stanley has killed himself, "I would call the turtle, but the turtle couldn't help us." Yet Patty has had no contact at all with the turtle. Although these flashes of precognition occur in It, the novel is dominated by the intrusion of the past. The past that returns in King's fiction is usually one that has been deliberately forgotten and suppressed. I think that everybody has a backhoe in his or her head, and at moments of stress or trouble you can fire it up and simply push everything into a great big slit trench in the floor of your conscious mind. Get rid of it. Bury it. Except that that slit trench goes down into the subconscious, and sometimes, in dreams, the bodies stir and walk. Christine. All of the 7 major characters in It have forgotten parts of their past so thoroughly that they can access this material only in dreams, where the memories cause them to moan and cry out, but which they forget on waking. Stanley Uris wakes from a dream and thinks, "My whole pleasant life has been nothing but the eye of some storm I don't understand. I'm afraid." But then it just fades, the way dreams do. Conscious attempts at recall do no good, for, as Proust discovered, voluntary memory is of no value as an instrument of evocation. When Mike Hanlon makes phone calls, however, each person he calls begins to recapture the lost time through sensory stimulation that functions like Proust's famous Madeleine. The most trivial experience is imprisoned in a vase filled with a certain perfume and a certain color and raised to a certain temperature. These vases are suspended along the height of our years, and the purity of their climactic content is guaranteed by forgetfulness. Then, when the memories, vases, are opened, we are flooded by a new air and a new perfume, new precisely because already experienced. Each of the characters experiences this return of experience. Stanley Uris remembers the sign of It and slits his wrists in a bathtub. The sound of the name of the Derry townhouse brings it back to Rich Tozier. Something was happening down there in the vaults. They're cracking open, and the vampires you thought were dead are all flying out again. Ben Hanscom, flying first class on United 41, feels the wall of time grow suddenly thin. Some terrible, wonderful peristalsis has begun to take place. He thinks, "My God, I am being digested by my own past." And as he slips into sleep, the wall between past and present disappears completely, and he tumbles backward through years like a man falling down a deep well. Eddie Kasprak remembers, "How I spent my own summer vacation in that dim, dead year of 1958, and thinks his Amtrak train is not going north, because it's not a train, it's a time machine. Not north, back in time." Beverly Rogan uses an image the reverse of the one in Christine. Someone had started up a big bulldozer in her head and begun excavating a mental graveyard, only it was names instead of bodies that were turning up, names she hadn't thought of in years. When Bill Denborough hears the name Derry, a door opened inside me and some horrible light shined out, and I remembered. The unwelcome intrusion of the past into the present is horror enough, as anyone can verify who suddenly and unexpectedly remembers the recent death of a loved one. But even worse is the horror of repeating the past. Being caught in a cycle produces its own unique horror. A constant rotation within the order of nature is demonic in itself. Northrop Frye, Anatomy of Criticism. And King uses this fear of a repeating pattern in several of the short stories before expanding the structure of the repetition in It. The narrator of Strawberry Spring cannot remember the murders he has committed, and thus 8 years later he repeats the slaughter, thinking, there may be a cycle for that too. The young narrator of The Man Who Loved Flowers is also locked into the pattern of the past, looking for Norma, and when he fails to find her, killing with a hammer the woman he mistakes for her. Norma has been dead for 10 years, and he has now carried out 6 murders. At the end, he continues looking for Norma, locked into the cycle of the past. The haunted overlook hotel of The Shining wants to keep its past simultaneously with the present, and the Wendigo regularly activates the power of the Micmac burial grounds beyond the pet cemetery to bring back the dead. The pattern inherent in King's cycle of the werewolf is a monthly pattern of evil, of waxing and waning violence with no cause for its pattern, for there is no more reason for its coming now than there would be for the arrival of cancer, or a psychotic with murder on his mind, or a killer tornado. Its time is now, its place is here. Repetition creates and is fostered by habit, and habit and memory are attributes of the time cancer. Beckett. A high level of crime and murder has always existed in Derry, Maine, and the townspeople have accepted it. They turn away from matters which intrude and forget anything which upsets an ordinary and habitual view of life, because memory is subject to the more general laws of habit. Habit is a compromise effected between the individual and his environment, the guarantee of a dull inviolability. Life is a succession of habits, since the individual is a succession of individuals. The pact must be continually renewed. Beckett. This renewing of old patterns of behavior occurs with all of the characters who return to Derry, but the best example is Ben Hanscom's return to the Derry Public Library. First, he walks around the building. Eventually, he would walk away, as he was doing now, and circle the building to the front door, as he was doing now. But he would always pause and look back once, as he was doing now, before the bulking stone shoulder of the adult library cut off the sight line to that delicate umbilicus. He acknowledges the feeling of déjà vu, but becomes genuinely frightened when he hears a woman reading the same story to the children that he heard her read years before. Am I supposed to believe that's just coincidence? Because I don't. Is something really stapling the past and present together here, or am I only imagining it? When he sees it manifest itself as Pennywise the Clown, and discovers that he has again checked out the same book by Stephen W. Meader that he checked out years before, he realizes that he is caught up in a cycle. The repetition of these cycles has been traced by Mike Hanlon back through the history of Derry, and he has found that the creature has reappeared approximately every 27 years. Despite the fear and possibility of death, all of the characters acknowledge, if only to themselves, that they have never felt as alive as they do on the return to Derry to battle it. This exuberance occurs because, although they are caught up in the cycle of it, they have broken the mundane cycle of their ordinary routines. The periods of transition that separate consecutive adaptations represent the perilous zones in the life of the individual, dangerous, precarious, painful, mysterious, and fertile, when for a moment the boredom of living is replaced by the suffering of being, that is, the free play of every faculty. Beckett. Only by returning to the freer mental states of children are the characters able to finally defeat it. The confrontation between it and the children can be considered one between habit and imagination. It did not want change or surprise. It did not want new things, ever. It wanted only to eat and sleep and dream and eat again. On the first encounter with the children, it acknowledges their imaginations had a certain raw power it had briefly underestimated. It also realizes that the children had turned their imaginations against it. The bonding of 7 extraordinarily imaginative minds had brought the creature into a great danger. By turning its shape-changing ability on itself, it was forced to be and to react as their combined imaginations dictated. And that is why Dembra, the writer who had trained his imagination, was the strongest in fighting the creature. As Richie Tozier creates his imaginary voices and throws them against the creature, they also draw blood. He warns it, "I'll voice you to death." And Eddie's aspirator, which shoots acid down the creature's throat because he believes it will, severely wounds it. After the defeat, however, the survivors immediately begin to forget the experience and to return to ordinary lives. The creature of habit turns aside from the object that cannot be made to correspond with one or another of his intellectual prejudices, that resists the propositions of his team of syntheses. Beckett. An excess of imagination is not a viable commodity for routine existence, and the past that has returned to haunt them seems this time to be truly laid to rest. In this novel, and many of his previous works, King has tapped into a fear that haunts every person, the dread of living again through the confusion and traumas of his past. King forces us back to the insanity we experienced as children, and starts up the cycle of fear and confusion that we always knew was there. In his fiction, we experience the true horror of time, when the inescapable past blights and usurps the future.